All right, so today we're going to be taking a look at the nervous system. We're going to be able to identify the two divisions, the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system, and take a look at the three types of neurons that work together to transmit and relay information throughout the body. All right, so these are the three definitions that you need to be able to identify for the vocab quiz. Our nervous system consists of all the nerve cells. It is our speedy electrochemical communication system. So there is this electrochemical reaction that takes place, and it happens very quickly. It's the speedy of our two systems. The endocrine system, which we'll talk about later, is our slower hormonal communication system. So the two divisions are the central nervous system, which consists of the brain and the spinal cord, and the peripheral nervous system. And the peripheral nervous system extends from the brain and spinal cord to other areas of the body. Our sensory and motor neurons connect our central nervous system to the rest of the body. So this is a nice visual to help you look at the breakdown. You see the peripheral and central nervous system. The central nervous system is simply by itself the brain and spinal cord, and the peripheral broken down into the autonomic and the somatic. The autonomic is broken down even further into the sympathetic and the parasympathetic division. And so we'll talk about each of those in a minute. So we have three different types of neurons that work together and communicate and allow for our body to respond. The sensory neurons carry information from our sensory receptors to the brain and spinal cord in the central nervous system. So our sensory neurons take in any incoming information via all five senses, and those sensory receptors communicate with our brain via our interneurons, and then our motor neurons respond. So they carry information from the brain to our muscles and to our glands. So our interneurons are housed in our brain and spinal cord. We actually have the most interneurons because we have so many neural networks and clusters in our brain and spinal cord. And then that information is taken and relayed to the other areas of our body that need to respond, whether it's a muscle or a gland. Our peripheral nervous system is broken down into two parts, the somatic nervous system and our autonomic nervous system. Our somatic nervous system is the division of our peripheral nervous system that controls our skeletal muscles. Yesterday we talked about ACH, acetylcholine, and how that particular neurotransmitter is at the junction of every motor neuron and every skeletal muscle. And so anytime we move, anytime we make voluntary movement, our somatic nervous system is active. Our autonomic nervous system is part of the PNS, or peripheral nervous system, that controls our glands and other muscles. We don't have to think about these, it just happens automatically. So whether it's our heart beating, our liver secreting glucose, whether it's our adrenal glands secreting adrenaline, that all happens automatically after receiving signals from our brain and spinal cord. All right, so on this slide you see the nerves described as cables containing many clusters of neurons, and it's part of the peripheral nervous system that connects our muscles, glands, and sense organs to our central nervous system. So you see highlighted in the skeleton man listed below, you see the yellow. And all of these cables are basically axons that have fused together, that have fired together, so they've wired together, and have extended throughout the body, allowing for our body to respond, whether it's hormone secretion or whether it's movement with our muscles. These nerve cables communicate with the brain and spinal cord. So our autonomic nervous system we know is the division that includes the autonomic nervous system is broken down into the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system is the division of the autonomic nervous system that puts our body in a ready, mobile position, like our flight or fight response, if it's any kind of a situation that requires energy or where you might be stressed. And it happens automatically, right? Because it's part of the autonomic nervous system. Our parasympathetic nervous system calms our body. We can only stay in that heightened state of arousal for so long. So our body has a system in place that calms the body and conserves the energy. So this next slide shows the two divisions. On the left side, you see the sympathetic nervous system, the arousing side of our autonomic nervous system. And on the right side, you see the parasympathetic nervous system. And you can see how one is arousing, the sympathetic, and on the other side, you can see the calming side. So I always tend to remember the difference between the two with the mnemonic device that one of my former students gave, in terms of the parasympathetic nervous system being like the paramedics. So how you can calm down. The paramedics are on the scene. It's a way for you to remember the difference between sympathetic and parasympathetic, because those are easy to get mixed up. So the arousing side of the sympathetic division allows for your pupils to dilate, your heart rate to increase. It actually slows the digestion of your stomach, because you don't need to digest food if you're worried about a stressful event such as like running a race or asking a loved one out on a date, that kind of thing. Your digestion can slow. It can digest later. Your liver can secrete glucose, your adrenal glands can release adrenaline or epinephrine, norepinephrine. Sometimes your bladder even relaxes. That's why when you're sometimes in a very nervous, aroused state, like, I don't know, playing hide and go seek, you always seem to have to go to the bathroom because your sympathetic nervous system relaxes your bladder. Or I remember being in track and remembering that I always had to go to the bathroom right before my race, even if I had just gone to the bathroom, because your sympathetic nervous system relaxes your bladder. The calming side, you can see, simply slows that aroused state. So your pupils will start to contract, your heart rate will slow, your digestion will start to be stimulated once again. You can see that your bladder contracts. So this is just a natural reaction after your autonomic nervous system has put you in a heightened state, specifically the sympathetic nervous system. All right, when you look at the central nervous system, this is a really good illustration that shows the difference between a sensory, motor, and interneuron. Remember, your interneurons are located in your brain and spinal cord. So the man on the right you see is highlighted in red. The brain and the spinal cord are red. That's where all of our interneurons are housed. Your sensory neurons are sensory receptors all over your body. And in the illustration, you can see the finger being held over the candle flame. Your sensory receptors, the red arrow, would send that information to your brain that it's hot. Your brain would process that information. The interneuron would send a signal to the motor neuron, and your motor neurons would allow for your finger to be withdrawn before you experience the pain of the hot flame. So this is kind of a simple hand withdrawal reflex where the information is carried from the skin receptors along the sensory neuron. From there, it passes to the interneuron, and then the motor neuron leads your muscles in your hand and your arm, the blue arrows below, to move away from the flame. We've also talked about neural networks and how neural networks form when you repeat skills over and over again. So with growth and with experience, we know that neurons that fire together wire together. And these neural networks form and allow for us to do multiple tasks. Think about like your quarterback. They've worked with so many plays hour after hour. They can simultaneously process where they're where their offensive players are located. They can process where the defensive players are positioned. They can simultaneously process which play they need to run and figure out the best way to complete the pass or to hand off the ball. And they do this all simultaneously because we've got these neural networks that have been strengthened with practice. So this is kind of an illustration of that. All right, and that's our last slide on the central nervous system. So we'll start up again with the endocrine system.